I have chosen to speak about another type of compliance, and honestly, to see the compliance from the other side of the interaction between tax policy and fiscal governance, meaning the compliance of the tax policy with the overall fiscal governance framework, meaning the fiscal rules and the overall budgetary process. So basically the interplay and the parallel management of tax of revenues and expenditure from this, in the budget. So for this reason, I will present tax revenues as a budgetary item. No worries, I will not spend much time on details, and then I will move on to the discussion on the fiscal framework and the medium-term objectives in terms of deficit in the country, and then conclude with some examples from the real Romanian policy making in that field. So, the very good news, Romania has achieved a remarkable, and I will repeat, remarkable fiscal adjustment since 2009. I think everybody in the room remembers the severe financial situation where the country was found back in 2008 and 2009, when the country ended up with closed markets or inability to finance in fair rates the debt, and requested the financial assistance from the European Union and the International Monetary Fund. Fiscal consolidation was a cornerstone in 3 successive financial assistance programs, and it was a cornerstone because it was the precondition for the country to return to the markets and properly and uninterruptedly being able to finance their budget. Fiscal consolidation came from both sides of the budget, but the most prominent contribution came from the expenditure. So basically, all the effort done in the area of tax policy and taxation led to a return of tax revenues, of total public revenues on the level of the pre-crisis budget conditions, while expenditure reduction was more than 5 percentage points of GDP. What is public revenue? Public revenues are composed by both tax and non-tax revenues. In the case of Romania, as in many other countries, indirect taxation is the most important element of budgetary revenues, followed by social security contributions and direct taxes, meaning taxes on income and wealth. Just to remind you that with indirect taxes we mean value-added tax and excises. These 2 categories mostly are mostly important, are mostly those contributing to the indirect taxes. So, still, comparing tax and non-tax revenues, tax revenues are the most important source of financing of public budget. Out of 33.4% of GDP of public revenues, around 80%, namely 27.5%, is the total tax revenue. But, let's start. Tax revenue are comparatively low. Romania, against the overall impression in the country, as a whole, is not a heavily taxed country. Against the tax burden of 39% of GDP in the EU on average, Romania has a tax burden of 27.5% of GDP, meaning more than 10 percentage points of GDP lower than the EU average. And also because this argument very often comes in the public dialogue, Romania has the lower tax burden compared also to the regional peers, so Hungary, Czech Republic, Poland, Slovakia, Bulgaria. So it seems that one could think that there is kind of room to increase tax revenue. And I think that for different regions in this room and different starting points, I mean, nobody would really disagree about that. But does Romania need to increase tax revenues, and how? This is a key political decision and key political policy choice, let's say. And how this will be decided. I think that the needs of the society and the targets of the country will determine why and how the country needs to make some further effort in tax collection. So basically, for example, Romania would like to choose to increase kind of some expenditures, like health and education, that everybody agrees that they're quite low, and data show that they're quite low comparing to the EU, but also the peer countries. And I think that every citizen can see that there is quite big room of improvement of the public service in these sectors. But again, this is a decision that should be taken on a higher level and after a discussion with the society. And in any case, any decision cannot be seen outside the budgetary process. And here, this is the point where my main topic comes. Because the interplay between revenue and expenditure needs to be seen within the country's fiscal framework. And by the word framework, we mean rules and limits. So, yeah, we talk about fiscal framework, and why we use the word framework is because it sets kind of limits and kind of rules on how to move on. It gives the guidance, it gives the overall, it doesn't really say how and why, but is on the level of the member state and the local society to decide how and why. But the targets and the limits are there, and they come both from the European and the national framework. On the level of the EU, everybody knows, I think, that the European Union has agreed on the Stability and Growth Pact, and all member states have agreed in the Stability and Growth Pact, and they have consent in both corrective and preventive arms, meaning that the public deficit of a country should not exceed 3% of GDP, while the medium-term objective of the country cannot exceed the level of minus 1% of GDP in structural terms. So this is the limit for the fiscal target. And this has been also agreed by Romania when it signed the fiscal compact. And this was also agreed on the national level when the country adopted in 2010 and amended in 2013 the so-called fiscal responsibility law that, from our view, is a very good law and should be implemented. I would like also to make a reminder at this point, because the idea of low deficits is sometimes misunderstood, not only by the citizens and the social dialogue, but sometimes also from the higher levels of the representatives of the society. So why do we discuss about medium-term objective of minus 1% of GDP? Overall, let's agree that low deficit is not about a reasonable austerity because some people, they have decided to take revenge from the societies, but it's about sustainability of public finances. It is about sustainable debt levels and also sustainable public finances in the sense that the country can go out in the market, get money to finance their needs if they exceed their means. So this interplay, this difference that we always calculate, what do I earn, what do I spend, The difference should be very low, and certainly on a level that everybody agrees that is sustainable in the longer term. And I would like also to make another note that because we also calculate fiscal targets in structural terms, it means that we take into account the economic cycle. And I will try to make it a bit simpler and say that structural deficit is a calculation of deficit that was invented in order to take into account the overall economic condition. So basically, when a country is in the downturn, it's in recession, the target increases, or there is room for higher spending. When we are in good days, like today, the target somehow decreases, so we have room for less spending because it's supposed that it's not needed in the economy at this moment. So, some other good news. Romania is there. Romania achieved the medium-term objective of -1% of GDP already in 2014, meaning 1 year earlier than planned by anybody else. So this is a very good news. What is kind of challenging is that the country should remain at this level of structural deficit after 2015 and 16, etc., etc. So basically the challenge now for the country is to keep this achievement, is to maintain this achievement. And I think that this would be not easily, but let's say that it's not so difficult to be achieved, because the way to achieve it is provided by the European and the national framework, and the only thing needed is to implement and respect this framework. So, for example, in the annual budgetary process, but also in the medium-term fiscal management and design, we have some important milestones, meaning the convergence program that the country needs to, every member state needs to submit to the European Commission every spring, in April. There, the countries usually describe their medium-term objective, the path to achieve these objectives, the measures and policies that will help to achieve their targets. In the national framework, Romania has established the so-called adoption of fiscal strategy. Fiscal strategy is a longer-term strategic document that basically describes what is the fiscal dream, the fiscal vision of the government, and it also provides for the annual expenditure ceilings per category and per agent in the public sector, but also the revenue targets. Can you imagine? There is a provision in the national legislation that says that everybody, like every citizen, every economic agent in the country, should be able to know what is the revenue target for the next and the next year and the year after the next year, so in the medium term. Of course, the annual budget process that confirms the targets for the budget and details the targets of the budget on an annual basis, and if necessary, the budget rectifications that take place normally within 1 year. So basically we have a very, very sound fiscal framework that allows us to design, allows in the country to design and avoid surprises for the economic agents, because everything is kind of crystal clear, at least in terms of direction and targeting. The thing is that this framework is not implemented efficiently, and to be honest, I mean, it would be very nice to see it implemented properly throughout the year. Because if it was respected, then we could avoid these negative surprises that we mentioned earlier, and we could also achieve what is the final demand, which is the joint formulation of tax policy and expenditure decisions. So what we mentioned earlier, that we have the source of financing, but also we need to have kind of targeting on where and how we will spend. So how much do we need? And by having this in our mind, we know how we will design a proper tax system to achieve the targets in the medium, in the longer term, not only for a couple of months or 6 months or a year. This would enhance credibility of economic policies, would promote stability and predictability of fiscal policy, which is equally important for economic agents to respect the overall process. I will conclude with the real situation. As I mentioned again, and I would like to repeat, Romania is there. Romania achieved the difficult fiscal target, and Romania has established a very, very sound framework in order to properly make the decisions and properly design the revenue-related and expenditure-related policies. But instead of putting everything in a kind of process, what we've noticed is that this year the government adopted kind of tax policy decisions of more than 2.5 percentage points of GDP outside the standard budgetary process. So basically, it's the so-called tax code, the fiscal code, as it is called in Romania, that implied a cost or, I don't know, benefit, depending on the perspective, of 2.6 percentage points of GDP for 3 years, 15, 16, 17, and of course, it's a permanent intervention, hopefully, in the public management, in the public budget system. Same time, there is an increasing number of demands for expenditure increases, and some of those have been already adopted by the government. Increases in wages, re-establishment of special pensions, increases in capital spending, potential implementation of the unified wage law, which is, according to fiscal council estimations, will be more than 2 percentage points of GDP expenditure, and maybe more things to come. Fair enough, everything is welcome. What is the key message is that all these decisions can be accommodated. The thing is to be properly discussed and assessed in the framework, in the context. Does the economy has the means to finance all these demands, and when? Can it be everything financed in 1 year, in 2 years, in 3 years? So this is to be discussed and decided on the national level. What one could see is that at this moment there is a high risk of Romania derail from the medium-term objective. I wouldn't say that it has been seen, because this may come next year, but the risk is there. And the risk is there only because everything was decided outside the interaction, outside the process existing in the country, and outside the process that would safeguard, let's say, the respect to the rules. So, as a conclusion, I would like to repeat that taxation should not be seen outside the overall fiscal management context, is an integral part of the public budget. Decision affecting tax revenues then should be assessed under the light of policy priorities, of course, and the fiscal space existing, the budget financing needs, and the medium term, which is very, very important, medium-term budgetary objectives. And all this thing would somehow ensure the integrity of a budgetary process, and this in turn will enhance and promote stability and predictability of public policies, which is an important missing element at this moment in Romania. Thank you.